The ANC wants a commission of inquiry to look into the best electoral system for South Africa. The party argues that there's not enough time to devise a new system before the 2024 election. The National Assembly passed the Electoral Amendment Bill last month amid opposition from civil society that it does not go far enough in providing for independent candidates contesting provincial and national elections. I'm now joined by Tessa, who's with the non-profit organization, the Rivonia Circle. Tessa, thank you for making time this afternoon. Does it make sense to you that the ANC wants another study, another commission to look into our electoral system when we have already had the electoral task team chaired by Dr. Van Zyl Slabbert in 2003, but also in 2017, the high-level review panel by Kgalema Motlanthe, both of which did exactly what they want this new study to do?
Absolutely, Clement. I would take it one step further, that after the 2020 judgment was passed, and Parliament just sat and did nothing for the majority of the time, at least the first year after that, about this judgment and the bill, the Home Affairs Minister himself created a ministerial advisory council that spent months doing consultation, doing research, engaging different sectors of society to discuss exactly what kind of system would meet the requirements for the judgment. That Ministerial Advisory Committee had 7 members on it. One of those members was an IEC commissioner who eventually then didn't have a vote, for example, in the last decision about what would go forward to the minister and eventually to Parliament. So they left 6 people to make a decision. And those 6 people then ended up divided on 2 different options in their report. One option was a majority option. The 4 of the commissioners or advisory committee members agreed on. And that option came up with an option that, number 1, references the Van Zyl Slabbert report and the Motlanthe report and agrees with it in saying that we need a mixed system. A system that looks like our local government system where you have both proportional representation and you have direct voting where independent candidates, of course, would then have a fairer chance. What Parliament what the minister decided to do, and invariably the ANC as the governing party decided to do, is to go with a minority view of 2 people in that task team. And that's the view that we're sitting with now in Parliament. That's the view that has brought us to a bill and a version of a bill that has many defects, that has many questions that need to be answered, and that is very likely to be called unfair and unconstitutional. So the ANC had time. And also this question of time and this crisis of time that the ANC is talking about is by their own invention, by theirs and by Parliament's. Because again, they had 2 years, they had 24 months to do this work. 18 of those months, Parliament did nothing. The minister did then bring an option and bring an executive bill in January this year, giving Parliament only 6 months to finalize this bill. They rushed through public participation. The majority of South Africans have no clue that this is happening at the moment because we didn't have a Parliament and a governing party that really applied itself in the time that it has and now is crying foul about time because it created the crisis that it's now telling us we have.
Yeah. The party, in its submissions to Parliament, Tessa, to the NCOP, seems to suggest that the other reports that you and I are mentioning and those studies haven't been thorough because they say long-term reform should actually be the result of not just clear and thorough, but evidence-based options. I mean, does that hold, that argument?
It absolutely doesn't hold. If they believe that there was a defect to the process, they should not have deployed their Minister of Home Affairs to go about a task of a ministerial advisory council if in effect they thought an inquiry was necessary. This is the governing party of the country. They had every ability in the 2 years that the Constitutional Court gave them to do something substantive, to make sure their parliamentarians and the researchers in Parliament do that kind of work. If they wanted to establish a commission of inquiry into this, they could have established that commission inquiry without anybody saying anything. They made choices. They chose for the Minister of Home Affairs to put together a ministerial advisory council. They chose to wait a year to put that council together, giving the council and that committee very short periods of time. They chose for their own parliamentarians to do nothing for a year and a half. They simply cannot cry foul at this point. And also, we're not all talking about, massive reforms here. We're talking about responding to a very particular set of reforms that come from the Constitutional Court. So we may in fact agree that if you wanted to do wholesale changes to the electoral system, perhaps you want to have another round of engagements or consultations. But let's not pretend like work hasn't been done, and let's not pretend like we're not responding to a very particular thing that has been asked from the Constitutional Court about making sure we have free and fair elections in 2024 that includes independence.
So, Tessa, ultimately, how I'm reading this is that if we get another commission, that would just be a waste of money and a waste of resources, because even if a new study is undertaken, what are the chances that what it recommends will be implemented? It was clear with the Electoral Amendment Bill that MPs voted for it, and they don't want an electoral system that makes members of parliament accountable to those defined constituencies on a proportional representation and constituency system for national elections. So the question is, even if they do this new study, again, that's going to tell them the same thing that the Slabet task team told them, that the Kgalema Motlanthe task team told them, that the recent ministerial task team that you mentioned told them. Even if this report comes up with recommendations, that must still come before the same members of parliament who clearly don't want constituency accountability.
Absolutely, and constituencies is the sticking point and the thing that MPs and parties, and particularly the ANC, is running away from. The idea that a member of parliament can vote in this country on an issue without consulting anyone except their party leader and except their party members is absolutely ridiculous. What we really need to do in this country is start asking MPs about the work that they do. Why is it that we need an independent body when MPs have the opportunity to do this kind of research? They have committees for this kind of work. We must be calling MPs onto these programs, onto these platforms as the media, and ask MPs as the media, all of what is the basis on which you've made the decisions that you've made? Sorry, I hope I haven't broken up there for a second. But we must ask MPs, how did they make the choice to vote on this bill? Ask MPs about the details of this bill. Ask MPs who they consulted personally about this bill before they voted. That's exactly why electoral reform is needed, because they are running away from accountability and just doing the work. Parliament has resources to do research. Why are we having to ask other people to do it when we have voted for MPs, we have voted for these political parties to do the work? Yeah. If they don't want to do the work, that's fine. We can then find other people who do. But we must no longer accept that only the chief whip or the leader of the opposition in parliament or caucus leaders or ministers answer questions like these. Our MPs are accountable to all of us as a nation. As individuals, they raised their hands. They said that they want to represent us, and they did an oath of office. They must represent us. They must answer our questions. In fact, at random, we must be able to point to any member of parliament randomly, ask them why they voted for a thing, and they should be able to answer. Right now, what we don't have is accountability, and they seem to be running away from that. And that's why this constituency issue is the thing they're running from. Yeah.
Does the party not have a point, though, in that developing a new system would take at least 4 years? Because you're dealing here with constitutional changes, you're dealing with electoral logistics. Or do you think the time that they have already wasted after the Constitutional Court judgment, if you take that and you add it with the amount of time they've spent working on as that ministerial task team, that's enough time to actually come up with recommendations on this new system?
That was the court's logic. The court said you have 2 years as parliament to come up with an amended bill, an electoral act that works, so that the IEC has 2 years, the demarcation board has 2 years to implement it. So they are correct, it takes 4 years, but they wasted their 2 years. Now they're making it everybody else's problem. And I think what's also important is we must dispel the myth that particularly the things that are needed for a constituency-based system that makes it fair for independence does not require constitutional amendments. The ANC has started to peddle a myth that if you do constituency-based, that all of a sudden the president would need to be directly elected. That is untrue. That would require a constitutional change if the president needed to be directly elected. But that is not what's required for a dual PR and direct system. We know this at local government level because, as we can see, mayors get elected by the councils that they serve, even though there's direct elections and a PR mix at those levels. They're peddling a falsehood, and we must cut that out.
So Paul Mashatile, in his submission, says that this PR system and constituency systems are not the only options that are available. He mentions the multi-member constituency system with a PR top-up component. How would a system like that work? Because he says that could provide that additional accountability to voters.
Absolutely. And there are many options available to us. And all we're asking as the public, as civil society organizations who've been engaged in this, is that we come up with an option that is fair and that makes sense, that is rational and logical. You know, this is actually a concession on the ANC's part, that they realize that the system that they have put on the table right now is not workable. They know it's not workable, but they're now telling us they don't have time to make it a workable system before 2024. Between themselves and the Constitutional Court, they're going to have to decide what the implications of that are. But we must not think that what we have is all that we can have. They are absolutely correct. There are other systems that we could be looking into and that they could have been looking into, I reiterate again. But whatever we come up with, we definitely need a system that is workable, that is fair, that is just, that is understandable to the public, and a system that also encourages and increases the amount of accountability that MPs have to the public. All of those things are possible and should be possible without the kinds of rings that the ANC is trying to run around us right now because of the kind of crisis they've created.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, these members of parliament don't want to give us as voters and constituencies that power, right? Tessa Dooms, thank you so much for making time for us this afternoon.